but it pertains to money in a very specific way. And what Aristotle has in mind here is that magnificence deals with one of scale. So both the liberal person and the magnificent person act for the sake of the noble, but the magnificent man surpasses the liberal man not simply by the amount that they give. Of course, the magnificent person will give more than the liberal person, but they also differ in the aim that their giving is directed toward. So the magnificent man seeks to produce a great and a noble work. So think here of a philanthropist, possibly, who gives away millions of dollars for a great cause, to build libraries, or donates millions of dollars to pursue a scientific venture, maybe to build a museum, for example. And really, what Aristotle has in mind here is that public expenditures um, from the magnificent person would be devoted to sacred buildings, temples, sacrifices. Okay, so if the city of Athens wanted a new temple built, well, somebody's going to have to donate the money in order to build that. And he thinks the magnificent person is someone who will give that great sum of money, more so than the liberal person, but also because it's directed toward a greater end. I mean, it's directed toward a monument, a statue, a place of worship, a temple, something that could stand the test of time and really reflect the greatness of the person who gave that money, right, for that deed. Okay. So the excess of that, Aristotle says, is vulgarity or crassness. Okay, vulgarity or crassness. So someone who gives, and they give a lot, but they're doing it only for their own selfish reasons, right? They're very vulgar about it. Or maybe they give and it's all about them, right? It's not about the object that that the money is directed toward, or that the money is supposed to be, that the money is supposed to build, for example. So think of someone who's just vulgar, who's doing it all for show. In contrast, parsimony would be someone who, right, doesn't give anything, right, who's completely lacking in that regard. Someone who, well, isn't very forthcoming with what they have, although they could be more forthcoming. Okay, so I'm kind of running out of time here, so we're going to skip around to a couple of these real quick. We'll take number 7, gentleness. Gentleness is the virtue pertaining to anger. To anger. The gentle person, Aristotle says, is distinguished as one who wishes to be calm and not led by passion, but rather, as reason may command, he's more likely to forgive than someone who's motivated by anger or revenge. Okay, so gentleness, he thinks, is a virtue, the virtue pertaining to anger. The excess would be someone who is irascible, someone who is easily angered, who has a hot temper. So one minor thing would just set him off. That person, Aristotle would say, hasn't properly controlled their passions. Right? Anger too easily gets the better of them. Right? They don't have that virtue of gentleness. The defect would be unirascibility. Someone who never gets upset about anything. right? And we might be aware of people like this. Aristotle thinks it's perfectly appropriate to exercise anger. But anger, as he writes, should be directed in the right way. You should get angry over the right things for the right amount of time. And someone who never gets angry whatsoever, there could be something wrong there, right? There are things that are worth getting angry over. What about number 10? Friendliness. Friendliness. Many of us might not think of friendliness as a virtue, but Aristotle thinks that it's the virtue pertaining to human association. Okay, flattery, the excess, would be someone who will say anything to anybody just to make them happy. So they go around flattering people, right? They really don't mean what they say. Right? It's really not about friendship, but it's about making somebody feel good, flattering them. On the flip side, quarrelsomeness would be the defect. Someone who is very difficult to get along with, who's always fighting with people, who can never be friends for very long. Right? There's always tension in the room when that person is there. Okay, and we might be aware of people like this. More than likely we are. That would be a defect, Aristotle thinks. They're really lacking something, right? They're lacking that virtue that governs human interaction and human association. Okay, so that's just a sample of the moral virtues. And real quick, just a brief couple-minute presentation of the contemplative life. Aristotle, to make a long story short, in Book 10, argues that the best way of life, the most complete way of life, will be a life that's devoted to contemplation, or theoretical study, or, not surprisingly, philosophy itself. And he gives an argument for this. He argues that the philosophic life is the most continuous, it's not interrupted, it's the most self-sufficient, so it doesn't require it being dependent on something else, the way money does, or virtue, or pleasure. Right? So if you lose pleasure, you lose money, you lose honor, something's going to be lacking there. Well, you can never really lose contemplation, of course, unless you lost your mind or something. But he thinks that it's the most self-sufficient. It doesn't require anything beyond itself. And most importantly, he argues that it actualizes that divine element in human nature. So there's something divine about human nature, this ability to think, the ability to question, the ability to ponder, to think about our place in the universe. For Aristotle, that represents something divine. It represents the best of human nature. So those who fully actualize that potential achieve the highest way of life for Aristotle. But he's also quick to point out that happiness will also include, apart from contemplation, the moral virtues. It will include a certain amount of leisure and even external goods. And the most important, maybe of all external goods, are friends. Aristotle says that without friends, life wouldn't be worth living. So in addition to contemplation, to theoretical study, we also need equipment, Aristotle thinks. Whether it's a little bit of money, some external goods, friendship, leisure, moral virtue, We really have to have the full package in order to achieve what he thinks is the best way of life. But most importantly, that best way of life is represented by contemplation or contemplative activity. Okay, that was a little bit longer than what I had planned. If you have any questions, let me know. You can send me an email. Continue with the reading for this week, and we'll talk soon.